The day I found out about her betrayal started like any other. I was in the middle of finalizing the seating chart for the wedding, trying to keep my nerves in check. The air in the room was thick with the smell of fresh flowers and the faint hum of the city outside my window. I had been dreaming about this day for years, our perfect wedding, the one that would finally seal us together forever. My fiancée, Lisa, was nervously pacing in the next room, her voice muffled as she fussed over her dress. Everything was supposed to be flawless. Then I got a message from my brother, Mark. It was just a simple text, "Can't wait to see you tonight." I blinked, confused. Mark had been helping me with the wedding plans all week, joking about how he was my best man, but that message felt strange, too casual, too offhand. I shrugged it off, telling myself it was nothing. Boys being boys, right? I went back to my checklist, but that little feeling of unease stuck around like a dull ache behind my ribs. A few hours later, I was in the hotel lobby, waiting to check in. Lisa hadn't arrived yet, she was still at her parents'. My phone buzzed again, this time with a call from Mark. I hesitated before answering, my gut twisting. "Hey bro," I said, trying to sound casual. "Hey," he said, voice low. "Look, I need to tell you something, it's important." His tone was different, serious, almost shaky, my stomach tight. "What's up?" There was a pause, then he exhaled heavily. I've been sleeping with Lisa this week, during the wedding planning. I didn't want to tell you, but I can't keep it in anymore. I'm so sorry." The words hit me like a punch to the stomach. My mind spun. My legs felt numb. My palms turned to sweat. I stared at the lobby's marble floor, trying to breathe. "You're lying," I managed. "This is some sick joke." "No, man, it's true, I swear. I've been with her in the hotel suite. I have the texts, the photos. She's been lying to you this whole time." His voice cracked. "I never meant for it to happen, but it did." I couldn't keep it secret anymore. I felt a rush of heat flood my face, my vision blurred at the edges. For a second I thought I might vomit. I clenched my fists, nails digging into my palms, my body tensed like I'd been struck by lightning. "You're supposed to be my brother," I said, voice trembling with fury. "How could you do this during my wedding week?" "I'm sorry," he repeated, voice thick with guilt. I didn't want to ruin everything, but I couldn't keep lying. I love her, I really do. And that was the moment I realized everything I believed in was a lie. Everything I thought I knew about loyalty, family, trust, it had all been shredded by their betrayal. I looked at the phone, feeling a strange numbness settle in my chest. I knew I couldn't just shrug this off. I needed time to process, to figure out what came next. But one thing was clear, this wasn't just heartbreak. It was a battleground now, and I wasn't going down without a fight. I pulled my phone away from my ear and stared at the screen. My mind raced for what to do next. As I stepped toward the elevator, I caught sight of Lisa's name blinking on my screen. Her face flashed in my mind, her smile, her laughter, her whispers of forever. I felt my jaw tighten. If they thought they could get away with betrayal during the happiest week of my life, they were dead wrong. I took a deep breath. Time to plan. Time to turn their treachery into my revenge. I had no idea how yet, but I knew one thing. I wouldn't let them get away with this. Not without consequences. My pulse hammered in my ears as the elevator doors slid open. I stepped inside, fists clenched, ready to face whatever was coming next. The silence after that call was deafening, like someone had pulled the plug on all sound in my world. I stood there in the hotel lobby, staring at the elevator buttons, my mind racing 1,000 miles an hour. My stomach was a tight knot of shock, anger, and betrayal. I wanted to scream, to break something, but all I could do was stand there, feeling the sweat trickle down my forehead and the cold sweat on my palms. When I finally made it back to the room, Lisa was nowhere to be seen. I could hear her voice in my head, her laugh, her whisper, the way she looked at me like I was her everything. That image made me want to vomit. Instead, I sank onto the edge of the bed and stared at the empty space where she was supposed to be. I needed to hold it together, but my hands still trembled. I couldn't just go on pretending everything was fine. The trust was gone, shattered like glass under a hammer. I looked around the room, searching for something, anything, that could help me think. My eyes landed on the phone charger, then on my laptop. A dark thought crept in. What if I used this moment to turn their betrayal into my advantage? Not just for revenge, but to make sure they knew I was never going to let this slide. That's when I remembered the texts Mark mentioned, those photos, that evidence. I told myself I wasn't just going to confront them blindly. No, I needed a plan. A way to make them regret this, to make sure they paid for what they'd done. I pulled out my phone and opened the gallery. Sure enough, there were the pictures, her in the hotel suite. Her in flagrante, her lips pressed against his neck. I looked at them, slow and deliberate, feeling my anger boil over. I had to be meticulous. I decided I'd collect everything, all the evidence that proved their affair. When the time was right, I'd confront them both, but not yet. I needed control, a way to handle this on my terms. I sat there for a long moment, the adrenaline flooding my system, then started planning my next move. First step, I would keep the evidence hidden but accessible. Second, I'd reach out to a lawyer, just in case I needed to make some legal moves later. Third, I'd find a way to get back at them that would hit hardest without crossing a line. Revenge was a dish best served cold, and I wasn't about to let them see me sweat. A sudden knock at the door snapped me out of my thoughts. I slowly stood up, my heart pounding. When I opened it, I saw Lisa standing there, her face pale and eyes glassy. She looked like she'd been crying, her mascara smeared, her cheeks red. She tried to speak, but her voice cracked. "Please," she whispered, "just listen. I didn't mean for it to happen. It was a mistake. I was stressed, and Mark, he's been pushing me, and I—" "Save it," I cut her off, voice cold. "You think I'm stupid. I see right through you. All these years I thought I knew you, but you've been lying to my face." I took a step closer. "You and Mark, both of you, thought you could get away with this during my wedding week. That's pretty fucking low, even for you." She dropped her gaze, tears rolling down her cheeks. "I love you," she managed to choke out. "I swear it's over. It's just a stupid mistake." I shook my head slowly, feeling the rage simmering inside me. "Love? You call this love? You betrayed me in the worst way possible. I trusted you. I trusted my own brother, and I don't know how I'm supposed to forgive that." She reached out a trembling hand. "Can we talk, please? Just give me a chance." "No," I said sharply, stepping back. "There's nothing left to say. You've already broken everything. The wedding's off, Lisa. And as for Mark, he's dead too." "Me now?" As she looked at me with pleading eyes, I felt a strange emptiness inside. I knew I had to leave that room, that hotel, that entire chapter behind. But I also knew I was not done. Not yet. There was more coming, and I had to prepare myself for what was next. I told her to leave and slammed the door shut behind her. Standing there in the dim hotel room, I felt the weight of what had just happened. This wasn't just a betrayal. This was an attack on everything I believed was real. The anger was boiling over now. I clenched my fists, feeling the sting of my nails digging into my palms. I wasn't going to let this go, not without making them suffer. I pulled out my phone again, already typing a message to someone I trusted, someone who could help me turn this nightmare into something more. I had a plan, and I was going to see it through. Because if they thought I'd just sweep this under the rug, they were dead wrong. The seeds of their downfall had already been planted. All I needed was time to watch them burn. The next few days felt like walking through a fog. I stayed mostly quiet, going through the motions of packing up the hotel, pretending to be normal while plotting every move in my head. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face, the betrayal, the lies. The pictures I had stolen from my phone sat like a loaded weapon in my mind, waiting for the right moment. I knew I couldn't just confront them blindly. I needed a plan, something calculated, something that would hit them where it hurt most. I reached out to an old friend, a private investigator I knew from work. I trusted him, and I needed someone who could dig up more dirt, anything that would give me leverage. I told him I wanted everything: texts, emails, hidden cameras if possible. PIS are good at finding secrets people try to hide, and I was counting on him to help me turn this betrayal into a masterstroke. While I waited for his report, I started thinking about how I'd handle the confrontation. I wanted to ensure that they never, ever underestimated me again. I decided that I'd have to be calm, calculated, and ruthless enough to make them feel the weight of what they'd done without crossing into something that could backfire legally or morally. No violence, just enough pain to make them regret their choices. One afternoon, I got the call from my investigator. "Got plenty for you," he said. "Text messages, photos, even some recordings from a hidden camera I set up in the suite. It's all here." His voice was serious. "Your brother is completely caught, and Lisa, She looks like she's been crying for days. Seems like she's starting to realize she's in deep trouble. I felt a cold wave wash over me. I didn't let him see that I was shaken. Instead, I told him to send everything to my private email and to keep digging. I needed to prepare to time everything just right. That night, I sat alone in my apartment going over what I'd found. The evidence was overwhelming. Mark was on video, whispering to Lisa about how they'd meet again after the wedding, how they'd hide their secret. Lisa's voice, trembling but determined, saying she'd rather be with him than me. It was all there. This was my weapon. I knew what I had to do. I'd give them a taste of their own medicine. Not through words. I wanted to make sure they understood the blow was coming from me, and it was going to be devastating enough to make them regret ever crossing me. The plan was simple but savage. I would send everything to my brother and Lisa, along with a message that I wanted to meet. Not in anger, but in control. I'd be the one holding the cards, and I'd make them plead for mercy they wouldn't get. The next morning, I crafted the message carefully. I told Mark that I knew everything, every lie, every secret, every betrayal. I told Lisa that I wasn't going to let this slide, that I was coming to see them and I wanted to do it face to face. I sent the evidence first, then added a timestamp note. Be ready. I'm coming today and I expect honest answers, no lies. This is your last chance to explain. My stomach twisted. I felt the familiar tightness in my chest, the adrenaline, the fear, the anticipation. I knew they'd be panicked. Good. That's what I wanted. I wanted them to see me, not as the betrayed husband, but as someone who was finally taking control. Later that day, I parked my car outside their condo. My hands were clammy, but I kept my face calm. I walked up to the door, took a deep breath, and knocked. The door swung open. Mark stood there first, eyes wide with shock. Lisa was behind him, her face blotchy from crying. Come in, Mark said, voice trembling. Let's talk. I stepped inside, feeling the weight of all the rage I'd kept bottled up. I laid the evidence on the table just a few feet from them. You wanted to hide, I said, voice steady but cold. Now you're going to tell me everything, no more lies. Lisa looked like she was about to break apart. Mark looked like a man who knew he was finished. I saw the guilt in their eyes, and I knew I had them right where I wanted them, finally cornered, finally exposed. The game was over. The silence in the room was heavy, thick enough to cut with a knife. I watched both of them, waiting for the inevitable explosion, the admissions they couldn't deny. Mark's face was pale, shoulders hunched as if he was trying to shrink away from the truth. Lisa's eyes were red and swollen like she'd been crying for days, but I wasn't interested in their tears. I was here for the truth and for some semblance of justice. Mark finally broke the silence first, voice barely above a whisper. Look, I didn't mean for it to get this far, it just happened. I was caught up in the moment. I swear I didn't want to hurt you. I scoffed, feeling my jaw tight. Then why the hell did you send me those pictures? Why did I find her in your hotel suite trying to cover her tracks? I pointed at the evidence spread out on the table. That's not a mistake, Mark, that's betrayal. You and Lisa both thought you could keep this secret forever, didn't you? Lisa looked down, clutching her hands to her stomach. I thought I loved him, she whispered. I didn't mean to hurt you. Oh, cut the bullshit, I snapped. Love, huh? That's a hell of a justification for cheating on your husband during his wedding week. My voice was low but sharp, filled with the kind of anger that rattles your bones. You think I'd just forgive this? No, I'm done. Both of you are dead to me now. Mark's eyes darted around the room, desperation etched into his face. Please, man, it was a mistake. We're sorry. Can't we just forget this ever happened? I crossed my arms, feeling the heat rise in my chest. Forget? Yeah, right. You think I can just wipe this clean? You both spit in my face and you expect me to pretend it never happened. Sorry, that's not how it works. I took a step closer, voice rising just enough to make my point clear. You lied to me for months, maybe years. You manipulated me, played me like a fool, and now you want to brush it off. They looked at each other, silently pleading for mercy, but I had no mercy left, only cold, calculated resolve. I want to make something very clear, I said, voice steady now. You both thought you could get away with this. Well, I'm here to tell you you're going to regret ever crossing me. I've got everything I need, texts, photos, recordings. Now I'm going to make sure everyone knows what kind of people you really are. I paused, feeling the rush of adrenaline again. And I'll do it on my terms, not with threats or violence, but with facts, cold, hard facts. They tried to argue, to plead, but I raised my hand to stop them. Save your breath. I don't want apologies. I want you both to understand exactly what you did. And I want you to remember that I'm not some pushover. I'm not going to let this slide. Not anymore. I took a deep breath, feeling the tension in my shoulders. This isn't just about revenge. It's about standing up for myself. Because if I let this go, they'll think they can get away with anything, and I won't let that happen. I pulled out my phone, ready to leave the evidence with them, but also to record their reactions, so they'd never deny it later. You're going to hear from me again, I told them. And when I do, I want you to know I'm not coming back. Your betrayal has confirmed what I already knew. I'm better off without you. Without waiting for a response, I turned around and walked to the door. I could hear Lisa crying softly behind me, Mark muttering some weak excuse, but none of that mattered anymore. I had finally taken control. As I stepped outside and closed the door behind me, I felt a strange sense of relief. Not because I'd won, far from it, but because I finally had the upper hand. I knew their secrets now, and I was ready to use them. The only thing left, making sure they paid the price. This was just the beginning. Walking away from the door, I felt my pulse pounding in my ears. My hands were still trembling, but I kept my movement steady. I knew I'd done what I needed to do: expose them, put the truth on blast, and take back some sense of control that had been slipping through my fingers. I had all the evidence I needed now, and I was going to use it wisely. I took out my phone and sent a message to a friend I trusted, someone who could help me make sure this all stayed in my favor. No need to rush, I told him. Just needed to make sure the evidence was secure, and I'd handle the rest. I knew this wouldn't be over today, not by a long shot, but I felt a strange calm settle over me. Like I just stepped out of a storm and finally saw the sky clearing. I spent the next few hours carefully planning my next moves. The evidence was locked away in a secure folder on my cloud, encrypted and ready. I'd wait a day or two, let them stew in their guilt, and then I'd unleash everything at once, publicly, decisively. But I needed to make sure I had all the details right. This was my revenge, yes, but I was going to do it clean. No loose ends, no regrets. That night I couldn't sleep. My mind kept circling back to her face, the betrayal, the lies, the way she'd looked at Mark like he was her salvation. I kept feeling that deep, familiar sting in my chest, but underneath it was something colder now. Determination. I wasn't just hurt, I was furious. Furious enough to make sure they knew exactly how much I'd been taken for a fool. I poured myself a drink and sat on the balcony of my apartment, staring at the city lights flickering below. The cool night air brushed against my skin, but I could still feel a fire burning inside. I reflected on everything. How long had I been blind? How many signs had I ignored? I realized I'd missed the red flags, how Lisa was distant lately, how Mark seemed overly eager to help, how their stories didn't quite match up. But I was too in love, too trusting to see the truth. That trust had been broken into pieces, and now I was going to shatter theirs in return. I'd make sure Mark felt the sting of betrayal just like I did. I'd make Lisa regret every lie she told, every moment she spent pretending. I didn't know exactly how yet, but I knew the shape of my revenge. Slow, deliberate, unrelenting. I'd make them wish they'd never crossed me. The next morning, I woke early and sat at my desk, staring at the screen. I was already drafting the message I'd send to the world, details of their double life, proof of everything, a story that would haunt them forever. I'd send it to social media, to mutual friends, to everyone who needed to know what kind of people they really were. The truth was about to come out, and I was going to be the one holding the megaphone. As I finished the draft, I felt a strange sense of relief. I was finally reclaiming my power. I knew they'd try to deny, to spin, to minimize, but I would be ready. They'd see that I wasn't the kind of man who got pushed around, not anymore, not after what they'd done. I picked up my phone and hit send. The post went live. My heart beat faster as I watched reactions flood in: shock, outrage, some trying to deny it, all of it fueling my resolve. I'd done what I set out to do. Now all that was left was to wait and watch them crumble under the weight of their own betrayal. That's when I realized I'd finally won. Not by violence or threats, but because I'd taken control, exposed their lies, and claimed my dignity back. And as I sat back, sipping my coffee, I knew one thing for sure. I'd never let anyone betray me like this again. Because the worst kind of revenge isn't just making someone feel small. It's making sure they never forget who they messed with. It was time to close this chapter, to cut ties for good. I grabbed my keys, walking out the door with a sense of finality. I was done mourning. I was done hiding. I was done being their fool. I dropped the keys into the mailbox and turned around, knowing I'd start my life fresh, without her, without Mark, without the lies. And that, I realized, was the real victory. The aftermath hit me like a cold wave I hadn't seen coming. Overnight, everything changed. The social media post went viral faster than I expected. Friends, family, even people I barely knew, all saw what Mark and Lisa had tried to hide. The messages flooded in, some furious, some sympathetic, but all of them echoing the same thing: betrayal runs deep, and they'd cross a line no one should cross. Mark's phone blew up with calls and texts from relatives, coworkers, and clients. His reputation was crumbling before his eyes. I could see it in his face when he finally answered my call that evening. His voice was hollow, broken. "You've made your point. I get it, just leave me alone." I didn't bother to sugarcoat it. "You and Lisa thought you could get away with cheating, with lying in the shadows, but I've exposed everything. You can try to deny all you want, but the truth is out, and I'll make sure everyone knows the kind of people you really are." Lisa's silence was deafening. I knew she was probably hiding, avoiding the fallout, trying to salvage what was left of her life. But it was too late for apologies. I had already taken everything from her: her lies, her dignity, her sense of security. The damage was done. The trust I once had was shattered beyond repair. In the weeks that followed, I felt a strange mix of relief and emptiness. The pain of betrayal was still there, but it wasn't controlling me anymore. Instead, I was focused on healing, rebuilding, moving on. I sold the house I had bought with her name on it, cut ties with old friends who still defended her, and threw myself into work. Part of me wanted to erase her from my mind entirely, but another part, more hardened now, knew I'd never forget what they did. Looking back, I realized something crucial. I'd been naive, trusting too much, believing in the fairy tale that everything would be perfect. But betrayal like theirs doesn't just hurt, it changes you. It teaches you to be cautious, to guard your heart more fiercely. I'd lost a lot, but I gained something more valuable, a hard-earned lesson about loyalty and self-respect. I often wonder how Lisa and Mark are doing now. I doubt they're happy. I imagine Mark keeps looking over his shoulder, second-guessing every choice, every move. Lisa must be darting from place to place, trying to escape the shame. And me? I've moved on, stronger than I was before. Not bitter, just more aware. The biggest lesson I want to share is this: betrayal cuts deep, but it also reveals who you really are. It forces you to face your pain and decide whether you let it cripple you or turn it into fuel for something better. For me, it was about reclaiming my dignity, standing tall, and never allowing anyone to take my trust for granted again. So here's my advice. If you find yourself caught up in someone's lies, don't ignore the signs. Trust your gut. And if you catch them in the act, don't hesitate. Take control, expose the truth, and do what you need to do to protect yourself. Revenge isn't about hurting others, it's about saving your own sanity and integrity. Because in the end, the only person responsible for your happiness is you. I handed over the keys to my old life that day: the house, the false dreams, the betrayed trust, and I walked forward into something new. It wasn't easy, and it still isn't perfect, but I'm finally free, and that's all I needed.